Hello, I'd like to talk to you today about grief. Not just plain ordinary grief, but cumulative grief. That's the kind that happens when there's been lots and lots of losses on top of each other. And right now we are talking not just about deaths in the care home, but also about the losses that are happening all over the world. So it's the loss of your routine, the loss of your daily rhythm, the loss of being able to touch people without thinking about it, all sorts of losses. The thing is, how do we manage when there are these multiple losses on top of each other, and particularly when there's a death of a person that you know, and then there are more on top of that in a short period of time? My name is Jane Duncan Rogers of Before I Go Solutions. We help people to make good end-of-life plans, and hopefully well before they are really necessary. And we also help people with talking about the grief that comes with death. So today I have got 7 pointers for you just to help you begin to think through how you might cope when you have one death after another after another. The first one is to understand about the stages of grief. These are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I'll go through them right now. But first of all, let me say that they are not necessarily all felt by everybody. They are not meant to go from one stage to another nice and neatly. And you may or you may not feel them all within the space of 1 minute or within the space of a year or whatever. They're just useful things to understand as a backdrop when you know that you and your colleagues are experiencing grief. So denial is obvious, isn't it? It's when we just can't believe it. We're like, how can this be happening? It's that kind of feeling. Anger is not always recognised as a valid emotion to do with grief, but it is really important. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel cross. It's okay to feel irritated. It's okay to feel rage. When my husband died in 2011, I can remember stomping up and down the corridor in our house afterwards, feeling furious with him for abandoning me. That's okay. You can get the feelings out, you can put them out in a journal, writing, or you can be talking about it, and I'll say more about that later on. Bargaining. Bargaining is when you go, if only I do this, then maybe that won't happen, or it will happen, whatever it is. This is a really common way of dealing with a death or multiple deaths, and it's absolutely fine. It's not right or wrong. None of these stages are right or wrong. They are just things for you to be able to understand as a context within which you may be having all kinds of feelings, because that's what grief is, all kinds of feelings all over the place. So the fourth is depression or maybe sadness. And of course, sadness is really relevant and completely understandable as part of grief. And it's one of the ones that we really know as a society. We accept that somebody is sad when they're grieving. And sometimes that's tears. And sometimes it's just a trickle of a tear. And sometimes it's a great big burst. And I want to say that all of those are okay. And if you don't feel tearful, that's okay too. That's just another form of grief. And then we have acceptance. Now, acceptance does not come just at the end of this process, which does not go, as I said, in a nice, neat way. It goes all over the place like this. That's what grief is like. It does not go like that. So acceptance can be in a moment of accepting that somebody has died, and it can happen as quickly as a few hours after someone has died to actually never. Some people never get to that place. But it is about you saying inside yourself, okay, yeah, this has happened. And then in the next moment you might be in one of the feelings. That's okay. So understanding those as a context is going to help you to understand more about what you might be feeling if you are in a place where there's one death after another, and it just all feels a bit too much. Okay, number 2, it's really important to give yourself conscious time to acknowledge each death. Now, the thing about this is you may or may not have time. You may or may not be able to use that time in the way that you want, but it's not so much the length of time that is important as the consciousness with which you acknowledge that person has died. So that warrants taking just 2 or 3 minutes to really let it sink in and to be with that person, to share about it in a meeting, maybe one of your co-worker meetings, to talk to somebody else about it individually, maybe to take time alone with that person or with that body. That's okay too. Number 3 is about the other bereavements that you may have suffered in your life. Sometimes when we have had previous bereavements but haven't been able for whatever reason to grieve those properly, then they come up again when a current bereavement happens. So if you find that one of the residents has died and actually you are feeling overwhelmed with grief, more than you would have imagined, just take a look and see if there are any other unresolved deaths in your family or your friends or your history. For example, a client came to me once because her dog had died and she was beside herself with grief. She couldn't even contemplate going back to work. And what had happened was that it had triggered all sorts of emotions from previous deaths when she had been a child, and there had been several in her family, but she hadn't realised how important that had been. So just watch out for that and be kind to yourself if that's what's happening for you. Number 4, grief can cause us to lose faith. We can, if we have a strong faith, whether it's religious or spiritual or whatever, it can make us, when somebody dies, it really can make us question life. And if there's a lot of deaths altogether, it can make us question the whole purpose of being alive in the first place. And that can make you feel quite wobbly. My favourite saying with this to remember is, faith means that I will be okay no matter how things turn out. Faith means that I will be okay no matter how things turn out. That can provide quite a lot of solace in a time when you may feel bereft because you've lost your faith as well. Okay, number 5, rituals to remember residents. This is really important. When somebody dies, it's the end of a long-lived life. You may not have known them during that time, or maybe you have had the opportunity to talk to this person and understood something about their lives. It's really important to recognise that this has happened, not just for you, but for the family members and also for the other residents. So the sorts of things I'm talking about is a ritual letting go of the person that occupied that room. So that's not just cleaning the room, of course that happens. It's pausing and allowing the memory of that person to fully be there in your heart and being grateful for their presence in your life. It might be talking about that person in a gathering together with your colleagues. You might want to encourage reminiscing from everybody, from the co-workers, from management, from other residents. That's all absolutely fine. You might want to ask if people would like something of that person's belongings. Obviously, that's got to be okay with the family. So the important thing here is to be aware that remembering the resident is about a ritual and not just doing it in a more of an unconscious manner. I'm sure you probably don't do that anyway, but if you're aware that actually what you're doing is a ritual and therefore in itself it is healing for you and for others, then that really brings more meaning to it. Okay, number 6 is talking about death openly. Well, we really need to do that these days, but it's still not happening because we're afraid. But in a care home, that is what happens. It's just one of those things, isn't it? But you'd be amazed at how many people still don't talk about this as a natural part of conversation. So I would like to suggest to you that you bring into conversations end of life discussions. It's okay to do that. It's okay. In fact, it can even be a relief sometimes to the people. In fact, many times to the people who are coming towards the end of their life. Everybody knows it. Not everybody wants to face up to it, but you'd be surprised at how many people are actually, relieved is the word, relieved when somebody else dares to bring up the topic. And finally, you might want to consider professional help to cope with your grief. It can be perhaps surprising how much that can help. Just the knowledge that somebody else is there for you, only for you, and that their job is to listen to you or be with you in whatever way that is. It's different from a friend listening. With a professional, it's a one-way relationship where their attention is solely on you and solely to help you move through this really difficult time. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you want to explore any more about what I do and what our organisation does, please visit beforeigosolutions.com. Thank you.